The spring wind moved softly through the hills of Virginia, carrying the smell of wet earth across the old farm. A man worked in silence, repairing a section of fence winter had torn apart. A former Navy SEAL, a man who spent most days alone. The work kept his hands busy, the silence kept everything else away. Then, at the end of the gravel road, a truck appeared. An elderly woman stepped out. A small German shepherd puppy rested quietly in her arms. In her other hand was a worn suitcase. She walked slowly toward the gate. The man watched her approach. He didn't recognize her. When she stopped a few feet away, she held out a weathered wooden box. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the woman looked up. "My husband asked me to bring this to you before he died." The former SEAL frowned. The woman swallowed softly. "He said if life ever became too heavy for me to carry alone." Her voice trembled just slightly. "I should find Cole Bennett." The man stared at her, because that was his name. And somehow, a promise he had made 16 years ago was standing at his gate. Before we begin, share the city you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If this story moves you in any way, consider subscribing and becoming part of this journey. Now, let's begin. Spring had returned to Floyd County, Virginia, with a kind of gentleness that made the old farms look forgiven. Dogwood blossoms opened along the narrow roads, pale against the wet bark, and the Blue Ridge Hills rolled away under a soft gray sky that seemed to hold back its rain out of courtesy. The fields around Cole Bennett's farm had begun to green again, though the fences still carried winter's damage in their crooked posts and loosened wire. Cole worked alone near the lower pasture, driving staples into a split rail with his left hand doing most of the labor. His right hand, stiff from old nerve damage and a wrist that never healed clean, rested against the wood more often than it helped. At 39, he still had the build of a man shaped by hard training, but his movements had grown careful in ways that irritated him. The hand reminded him, every morning, every hour. 5 years earlier, Cole Bennett had been a Navy SEAL leading 3 men through a blown-out village in northern Syria. The report called the mission complicated, fast-moving, and unavoidable in its outcome. The Navy cleared him of fault after the investigation, using words like sound judgment under hostile conditions and unrecoverable casualty environment. Cole hated every one of those words. They made death sound organized. 3 men had gone in with him. 3 men had come home under flags. Cole came home breathing, with a damaged hand, shrapnel scars hidden under long sleeves, and a silence inside him that no doctor in Norfolk or Roanoke had ever managed to name correctly. People in Floyd County knew some of it. Small towns did not need full stories to build half-truths around a man. They knew he had served. They knew he had been hurt. They knew he had inherited his grandfather's old farm off a winding road past hayfields, churches, and weathered mailboxes with faded flags tied to the posts. So they were kind. That was the worst part. At Slater's Feed and Seed, folks lowered their voices when he walked in. At church suppers, women packed extra food for him and smiled with careful pity. Men who had once asked for help fixing tractors stopped asking, as though work might break him. Even the teenagers at the gas station stood straighter when he passed, pretending not to stare at the hand he kept curled near his side. Cole stopped going into town unless he had to. The farm suited him better. It asked for sweat instead of conversation. A broken fence did not look at a man with sorrow in its eyes. A field did not him he had done his best. He struck another staple into the post. The hammer slipped slightly in his left hand, and the jolt traveled up his damaged wrist like a lit fuse. Cole clenched his teeth and waited for the pain to settle. A truck turned in at the far end of the gravel drive. Cole looked up. It was an older green pickup, moving slowly, its tires crunching over wet stone. He watched it pass the empty equipment shed, the rusted cattle gate, and the maple tree his grandfather had planted before Cole was born. The truck stopped near the front gate, and for a moment nobody got out. Then the driver's door opened. An elderly woman stepped down carefully, one hand braced against the doorframe. She wore a dark raincoat, plain black shoes, and a faded scarf pinned neatly beneath her chin. In one arm, she held a tiny German shepherd puppy wrapped in a blue blanket. In her other hand was a worn suitcase, the brown leather scuffed pale at the corners. Cole set the hammer on the fence post. The puppy shifted in her arms, its black and tan head poking out from the blanket with sleepy confusion. Its ears were still soft and uneven, too young to stand properly. 6 weeks old, maybe. Not much more than a warm heartbeat with pause. The woman stood by the gate and looked toward Cole. She did not wave. Cole wiped his hand on his jeans and walked across the yard, his boots sinking slightly into the damp ground. The old habit returned as he moved. Notice the truck, the road behind it, the woman's posture, the way she held the puppy close but not fearfully. She looked tired but not helpless. Grief had settled on her face with quiet discipline. He stopped a few feet from the gate. "Mom," he said. Her eyes lifted to his. They were pale blue, sharp despite the years, and red around the edges from either wind or sorrow. "Cole Bennett?" He nodded once. "My name is Evelyn Harper." The name did not strike him at first. Then she shifted the puppy in her arms and reached into the truck through the open window, pulling out a weathered wooden box no bigger than a Bible. She held it against her coat for a moment before offering it to him through the gate. "My husband asked me to bring this to you before he died." Cole's damaged hand tightened against his thigh. "Your husband?" Her voice softened, though it did not weaken. "Walter Harper." The yard went still around him. For a moment the sound of spring disappeared. No birds in the fence line, no wind in the grass, no soft rustle from the puppy's blanket. Walter Harper. Cole had not heard that name spoken aloud in years, but it lived somewhere deep in him, tied to rainwater, cold stone, a rope around his chest, and a man's rough voice telling him to keep his eyes open. His throat worked once. "I didn't know," he said. Evelyn nodded. "He passed 8 months ago." Cole looked down at the box. The wood was old walnut, rubbed smooth by hands that must have opened it many times. On the lid was a small carved cross, simple and uneven, the kind a man might cut with a pocket knife while sitting on a porch after supper. He opened the gate. Evelyn stepped inside, the suitcase bumping softly against her leg. The puppy made a faint sound and pressed deeper into the blanket, as though the farm air had too much room in it. Cole took the box from her with both hands, though his right hand trembled slightly under the weight. It was not heavy. That made it worse. They walked to the porch without speaking. He set the box on the old wooden table beside the door. His grandfather's coffee rings still marked the surface, dark circles from another lifetime. Evelyn stood beside him, holding the puppy close while Cole lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of photographs. The top one showed a younger Cole sitting on a porch step, 23 and hollow-eyed, one pant leg cut open from knee to thigh. Walter stood beside him, broader then, with gray beginning at his temples and one hand resting on Cole's shoulder like he belonged there. Evelyn was in the background, holding a plate of food and looking at the camera with the patient expression of a woman used to feeding wounded things. Cole stared at the photograph for a long time. Beneath it were envelopes. Some had dates, some had no stamps. There were newspaper clippings folded carefully, articles about Navy deployments, military honors, and one small piece from a local Virginia paper mentioning Cole Bennett returning home after injury. Walter had kept them all. At the bottom lay a sealed envelope. His name was written across the front, Cole Bennett. The handwriting was Walter's. Cole touched the edge of it with his thumb but did not open it. Something in his chest had gone tight, not like fear, not exactly like grief. More like being remembered when he had spent years trying to disappear. Evelyn watched him quietly. The puppy wriggled once, then yawned with the grave seriousness of a tiny creature unimpressed by human sorrow. Cole almost laughed. Almost. He closed the box halfway, leaving the sealed letter where it was. "I don't understand why he kept all this," he said. Evelyn looked toward the pasture, where the broken fence leaned under the pale spring light. "Walter remembered people," she said, "especially the ones who thought they had been forgotten." Cole did not answer. The wind moved across the porch and lifted one corner of the blue blanket around the puppy. Evelyn tucked it back with a gentle hand, then looked at Cole again. "He always said you were the son life sent him late." For a long time after Evelyn left that afternoon, Cole sat alone on the porch with the wooden box resting beside him. The spring light faded slowly across the pasture. A tractor hummed somewhere beyond the neighboring ridge, and a pair of crows argued from the top of an old sycamore tree near the road. Lucky had fallen asleep against one of the porch posts, his oversized paws twitching occasionally as he dreamed. Cole looked at the photograph again, 23 years old, thin, exhausted, alive. The memory came back with surprising clarity. 16 years earlier, a storm had rolled across the Blue Ridge Mountains with very little warning. Cole had been fresh out of Budness training, carrying the confidence of a young man who believed determination could solve almost anything. He had taken a solo hiking trip through a remote section of the mountains west of Floyd County, wanting a few quiet days before reporting for his next assignment. The rain began before sunset. By midnight, it felt like the sky had broken open. A narrow creek became a river. The river became a wall of moving water. Cole remembered slipping, remembered cold, remembered trying to fight the current. Then nothing. When he woke up, he was lying on a couch beneath a handmade quilt. Every muscle in his body hurt. His right shoulder burned. His lips were cracked from dehydration. A man with gray hair sat nearby reading a newspaper. "Walter Harper, you planning on joining us again?" Walter had asked without looking up. Cole remembered trying to sit and immediately regretting it. Walter laughed, a deep, easy laugh. "You can be tough tomorrow." That was how it started. For nearly 2 weeks, Cole stayed at the Harper house, recovering from injuries that could have been much worse. Walter handled most problems with practical solutions and quiet patience. Evelyn cooked enough food for 3 people, and somehow never seemed surprised when a hungry young Navy recruit cleaned his plate in minutes. The house had been small, nothing fancy. Old hardwood floors, a porch swing that squeaked, a kitchen clock that ran 2 minutes fast, yet somehow it had felt larger than places 10 times its size, because people lived inside it. One evening after supper, Walter and Cole sat on the porch while cicadas buzzed across the fields. The conversation drifted toward family. Walter spoke about building a life in Floyd County. Cole spoke very little. Eventually, Walter asked a simple question. "Your folks still around?" Cole stared into the darkness beyond the yard. "No." Walter nodded. That was all. No awkward sympathy, no apology, no uncomfortable silence. Just understanding. The kind that lets a man keep his dignity. By the time Cole had left, Walter had given him a phone number written on the back of a seed catalog. "If you ever find yourself in trouble," Walter said, "call." Cole smiled. "If you ever need anything, call me." Walter tucked the paper into his shirt pocket. Deal. The memory faded. The porch returned. The years between then and now suddenly felt shorter than they should have. Lucky woke up and wandered toward Cole with the uncertain balance of a puppy, still figuring out how his legs worked. He climbed onto Cole's boot and promptly fell asleep again. Cole shook his head. A small sound escaped him, something close to a laugh. The next morning, he drove into town for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. Evelyn had invited him to see something. Blue Hollow Community Garden sat on the edge of Floyd County beside an old church and a narrow creek lined with willow trees. Raised garden beds stretched across several acres. A greenhouse stood near the back fence. Fruit trees bordered one side of the property, their branches beginning to bloom. People worked throughout the grounds. An older veteran repaired irrigation pipes. A widow arranged seedlings on a folding table. 2 retired couples prepared soil for spring planting. The place felt alive. Walter was everywhere, not physically, but in the things he had built. In the benches, in the garden signs, in the names people spoke with quiet affection. Evelyn walked beside Cole through the property. "Walter started with 3 garden beds," she said. 15 years ago. Cole looked around. It was difficult to imagine. He wanted veterans to have somewhere to go after service. Then widows started coming, then retirees, then families struggling with groceries. She smiled faintly. Walter never learned how to think small. Several volunteers greeted Evelyn warmly. Most recognized Cole. A few thanked him for his service. He answered politely. Still uncomfortable, still unsure where to place himself among people, they eventually reached a bench overlooking the garden. Walter's name had been carved into the backrest. Evelyn sat carefully. For a moment, she watched the volunteers working below. Then her expression changed. The sadness returned. "Victor Langley has been trying to buy this land for years." Cole looked at her. The name meant something. Even in Floyd County, everyone knew Victor Langley. Hotels, commercial developments, vacation properties, money, lots of money. "Why this place?" Cole asked. Evelyn sighed. "The creek, the location, the views." She paused. A luxury resort would make him millions. Cole studied the garden. People planting vegetables, people talking, people helping one another. He struggled to imagine luxury cabins replacing all of it. Walter stopped him several times. The answer came quickly. Evelyn folded her hands together. Victor never liked hearing no. A breeze moved through the trees. Below them, Lucky chased a butterfly nearly twice his size and tumbled headfirst into a patch of clover. For the second time in 2 days, Cole laughed. An actual laugh. Brief. Unexpected. The sound surprised both of them. Evelyn noticed. She didn't comment. She simply smiled. Later that afternoon, while helping move old records from a storage shed behind the greenhouse, Cole discovered several boxes of journals Walter had kept over the years. Most contained planting notes, volunteer schedules, fundraising plans, ordinary things. Then he found one journal dated only a year earlier, the final year. The handwriting became shakier toward the end. The entries grew shorter. Cole turned several pages carefully. Near the back, one paragraph caught his attention. He stopped reading. The shed seemed quieter suddenly. Outside, he could hear distant laughter from the garden and Lucky barking at something only puppies considered important. Cole looked back down at the page. Walter had written, "The thing I worry about isn't the garden." The next line sat alone beneath it. It's that the boy is still punishing himself. By the middle of May, Cole Bennett found himself driving to Blue Hollow Community Garden almost every morning. At first, he told himself it was temporary. Evelyn needed help carrying lumber, repairing irrigation lines, and organizing records Walter had left behind. The greenhouse still needed work after a rough winter, and several raised beds were beginning to lean where frost had shifted the ground beneath them. There was always something to fix. The work gave him an excuse to come back. Spring settled comfortably over Floyd County. The dogwood blossoms that had brightened the roadsides a few weeks earlier were beginning to fade, replaced by thicker leaves and longer afternoons. The garden grew greener each day. Tomato plants climbed higher. Rows of lettuce filled out. The small orchard Walter had planted years ago began showing tiny green fruit. Life moved quietly there. People did too. Cole spent much of his time listening. One afternoon, he helped Harold Simmons repair a section of fencing near the orchard. Harold was a 72-year-old Army veteran who walked with a slight limp and carried a thermos of black coffee wherever he went. They worked side by side for nearly an hour before Harold finally spoke. "You know why I still come here?" Cole shook his head. Harold stared across the garden. 3 years ago, after my wife passed, I stopped leaving the house." The older man pulled another staple from his pocket. "Didn't answer calls. Didn't go to church. Didn't care if I saw another person." The fence creaked softly as they tightened a section of wire. One morning, Walter showed up with a shovel. Cole looked over. "A shovel?" Harold smiled. He said he needed help planting potatoes. Another quiet moment passed. "I told him to get lost." Cole almost smiled. "What happened?" Harold drove the shovel into the dirt. He came back the next day. The smile widened. And the day after that, Cole understood. Walter had never been the kind of man who forced people to talk. He simply refused to leave them alone with their pain forever. A few days later, Cole met Martha Green while helping unload soil deliveries near the greenhouse. Martha had lost her husband to cancer several years earlier. She spoke about Walter while sorting seed packets. "He never treated people like projects." Cole glanced up. "What do you mean?" Martha folded a packet of beans and slipped it into a tray. "Some folks help because helping makes them feel important." Her voice softened. "Walter helped because he noticed when somebody was hurting." The words stayed with Cole. Every story seemed different. Every story sounded the same. A furnace repaired during a winter storm. A hospital bill quietly paid. A widow driven to appointments when she could no longer drive herself. A veteran who found purpose again through gardening. A family whose pantry stayed full through a difficult year. Walter's fingerprints were everywhere. Not on buildings, on people. That realization unsettled Cole more than he expected. For years he had measured value the way the military often did. Missions completed, objectives achieved, lives saved. Walter had measured it differently. One person at a time. The pressure from Victor Langley began increasing around the same time. The first certified letter arrived at Evelyn's house on a Monday. The second arrived 3 days later. Then another. Environmental reviews, property disputes, zoning concerns, land access requests. Every document required meetings, signatures, responses, and legal consultations. The paperwork piled higher on Walter's old desk. Evelyn never complained. Cole noticed the exhaustion anyway. Then the money pressure started. A local bank that had sponsored the annual Harvest Festival suddenly withdrew support. 2 longtime donors declined to renew their contributions. A community board member who had defended the garden for years abruptly changed positions and began supporting redevelopment plans. Nobody could prove Victor was involved. Nobody needed proof. Everyone in Floyd County knew how influence worked. One warm evening, Cole and Evelyn sat on a bench overlooking the garden as volunteers packed up for the day. The sound of distant laughter drifted across the property while Lucky chased a grasshopper through the clover. Evelyn watched the puppy for a moment. Walter knew this would happen. Cole turned toward her. He expected Victor to come back. She nodded. For years, the setting sun reflected softly across the greenhouse windows. Victor doesn't see a community garden. Her eyes followed the rows of land stretching toward the creek. He sees waterfront property. Cole understood that kind of man. Every place became a number. Every memory became a transaction. Every piece of land became an opportunity. A week later, someone broke into the greenhouse. The call came before sunrise. Cole arrived first. The damage hit him the moment he stepped through the doorway. The air smelled of wet soil and crushed vegetation. Plastic trays lay overturned across the concrete floor. Seedlings that volunteers had spent months nurturing were scattered beneath muddy boot prints. Irrigation lines had been slashed. Wooden shelving had been pulled apart and thrown into corners. The destruction felt deliberate, personal, not random vandalism. Evelyn arrived a short time later. She stood silently near the entrance while volunteers slowly gathered around her. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody needed to. The site said enough. The sheriff's department investigated. Photographs were taken. Statements collected. No witnesses emerged. No cameras captured anything useful. Victor Langley publicly condemned the vandalism through a spokesperson before the day ended. His statement sounded polished, professional, completely empty. The volunteers rebuilt. They always did. Neighbors donated replacement plants. Local churches organized work crews. Retirees showed up with tools and extra supplies. Someone dropped off a truckload of lumber without leaving a name. The garden kept going. Walter's influence still reached farther than Victor understood. Then Lucky disappeared. The puppy had become part of daily life at Blue Hollow. Volunteers greeted him every morning. Children visiting with grandparents searched for him before anything else. Even Cole had gotten used to hearing the small paws racing across gravel whenever his truck pulled in. One afternoon, Lucky simply wasn't there. At first, nobody worried. By evening, everyone did. Evelyn searched until dark. The next morning, she searched again. By the second day, the strain showed on her face. Cole found her sitting alone on Walter's bench near the orchard. The blue blanket she had carried to the farm weeks earlier rested folded in her lap. For the first time since arriving at Blue Hollow, she looked defeated. Not because of the legal battle, not because of Victor, because Lucky mattered. The search spread across the county. Farmers checked barns. Church groups shared flyers. Volunteers walked roadsides and wooded trails. 3 days later, a maintenance worker heard barking coming from an abandoned equipment shed near a neglected parcel of land outside town. Cole reached the location with 2 sheriff's deputies. Lucky exploded through the doorway the moment it opened. The puppy slammed into Cole's boots and immediately tangled himself in his own leash, trying to climb higher. The relief was so sudden it almost hurt. Inside the shed, they found food, water, and a length of rope. Someone had wanted the puppy frightened. Someone had wanted Evelyn frightened too. The investigation moved quickly this time. A maintenance employee connected to one of Victor Langley's development companies eventually admitted involvement. He confessed to taking Lucky and hiding him in the shed, hoping the incident would pressure Evelyn into giving up the fight. Victor denied everything. His attorneys denied everything. Nothing connected him directly. Nothing that would survive a courtroom. Yet the truth settled over Floyd County anyway. That evening, after returning Lucky safely to Evelyn, Cole drove home carrying Walter's wooden box beneath one arm. The farm was quiet. The sky had turned deep blue above the hills. Lucky slept beside the porch swing while crickets began singing from the fields beyond the fence. Cole sat down, opened the box, and removed the sealed envelope. His name stared back at him from the front. Slowly, he broke the seal. The first lines were written in Walter's familiar handwriting. Cole read them once, then again. The words reached places inside him he had spent years keeping locked. A long time passed before he folded the letter shut. He set it beside him and stared out across the dark pasture. He couldn't keep reading, not yet. Summer was approaching, and Blue Hollow Community Garden should have been thriving. The greenhouse had been repaired. New seedlings were taking root where the vandalized ones had once stood. Volunteers continued showing up every week, carrying folding chairs, gardening gloves, homemade pies, and enough determination to make up for what money could not buy. Still, something had changed. The pressure no longer came in waves. It came every day. Victor Langley had stopped pretending patience was part of the plan. A new consulting report suddenly appeared before the county board, questioning the long-term viability of the garden. Economic studies began circulating through town meetings. Local newspapers published articles discussing development opportunities and increased tax revenue. Several business owners publicly supported Victor's proposal, arguing that Floyd County needed jobs more than community gardens. The argument sounded reasonable. That made it dangerous, because every number Victor presented was technically correct. He simply left out the things that couldn't be measured. The widow who spent her afternoons talking to other people for the first time in years. The veteran who found a reason to leave his house. The retired teacher who grew vegetables for family struggling with groceries. Walter had understood those things. Victor never would. One warm afternoon, Evelyn invited Cole into the small office beside the greenhouse. A box fan hummed in the corner, pushing around air that smelled faintly of soil, coffee, and old paper. A man sat waiting at the desk. He appeared to be in his late 50s, with thinning gray hair and nervous hands that never seemed to stop moving. "His name is Richard Boone," Evelyn said quietly. The man nodded. "I used to work for Langley Development." Cole took a seat across from him. Richard looked toward the window before speaking. "I handled acquisitions." The word sat heavily between them. Property acquisitions, land deals, negotiations. The kind of work that often happened far away from the people affected by it. For nearly an hour, Richard explained what he knew. Years earlier, Victor had pressured elderly property owners into selling land below market value. Promises were made. Information was hidden. Legal loopholes were exploited. Most of it lived in gray areas where wrongdoing became difficult to prove. Then Richard mentioned Walter Harper. Walter had been one of the few people willing to challenge Victor publicly. More than once. "He cost Victor a lot of money," Richard said. The statement sounded almost like an apology. He also embarrassed him. That part mattered more. Cole could see it. Some men cared more about pride than profit. Victor struck him as one of them. Richard agreed to testify at the upcoming county hearing. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn looked hopeful. The feeling lasted less than 48 hours. Richard's truck was vandalized outside his home. All 4 tires were slashed, every window shattered. Nothing was stolen. The message was clear enough. The following evening, someone left a dead crow on his porch. No note, no explanation, no fingerprints, just fear. Richard called Evelyn shortly after midnight. Cole happened to be there when the phone rang. His voice sounded exhausted. "I don't know if I can do this." Nobody blamed him. Fear was persuasive, especially when it arrived at your doorstep. The weather began changing that same week. People in Floyd County noticed it first through small things. The air grew heavy. The wind shifted directions unexpectedly. Clouds gathered over the Blue Ridge Mountains earlier each afternoon and stayed longer than usual. Old farmers started watching the sky. The local weather station issued warnings. Then more warnings. On Friday afternoon, the county emergency sirens activated. Cole was working near the greenhouse when the first alert sounded. Volunteers immediately began securing equipment. Folding tables were carried indoors. Tools disappeared into storage sheds. Vehicles moved toward safer ground. The wind arrived first, strong, unnatural. The kind of wind that made trees bend before rain ever appeared. Within minutes, the sky darkened. A green-gray wall rolled across the mountains. Someone shouted from the orchard. Another volunteer pointed toward the western ridge. The funnel appeared briefly between the clouds, then disappeared again. Everything happened fast after that. Branches snapped. Metal roofing groaned. The greenhouse windows exploded inward. People ran. Someone fell. Someone screamed. Cole turned toward the noise, and suddenly he wasn't standing in Virginia anymore. Not completely. For one terrible moment, he was back in Syria. Dust, confusion, shouting, the sound of things breaking, the helpless certainty that disaster was moving faster than human beings could react. His chest tightened. His hands refused to move. The world narrowed. Just like it had 5 years earlier. Just like the day everything went wrong. The wind roared around him. A section of fencing tore loose and cartwheeled across the property. Somewhere nearby, glass shattered. Cole stood frozen. Seconds, only seconds, yet they felt endless. Then he saw Evelyn. She had fallen near one of the raised beds, not seriously injured, but trapped beneath a section of collapsed trellis. A few yards away, Lucky barked furiously from beneath an overturned wheelbarrow. Beyond them, volunteers were struggling through the debris-filled wind. People needed help. Real people. Right now. The paralysis cracked. Cole moved. Not because he stopped being afraid, because someone had to go first. He reached Evelyn and pulled away the broken wood. He helped 2 volunteers reach shelter inside the reinforced storage building. He directed others towards safer areas, organized quick searches, and accounted for everyone he could find. Years of training returned. Not the combat. The responsibility. The part that taught people how to stay calm when everyone else couldn't. The storm lasted less than 15 minutes. Its damage remained much longer. By sunset, large sections of the garden lay in ruins. Trees had fallen across planting beds. The greenhouse was nearly destroyed. Storage sheds sat twisted and broken. Volunteers wandered through the wreckage in stunned silence. Cole stood near Walter's bench, staring across what remained. The exhaustion felt familiar, so did the grief. Yet something was different this time. Nobody had faced the disaster alone. As darkness settled over Floyd County, headlights began appearing along the road. Pickup trucks, church vans, neighbors, people carrying chainsaws, generators, flashlights, bottled water, and work gloves. One by one, they arrived. The community Walter had spent 15 years building was showing up. The following morning, Richard Boone pulled into the parking area beside the damaged garden. He climbed from his truck and walked directly toward Evelyn. The bruises beneath his eyes suggested he hadn't slept much. Neither had anyone else. Evelyn met him halfway. Richard took a slow breath. Then another. When he finally spoke, his voice shook slightly. But it didn't break. "I'm still testifying." The county hearing was scheduled 3 weeks after the tornado. By then, Blue Hollow Community Garden still carried scars from the storm. Several raised beds remained damaged, and the greenhouse stood beneath temporary repairs while volunteers worked through long summer afternoons to rebuild what had been lost. Yet every Saturday, more people seemed to arrive. Some came carrying tools, some brought food. Some simply showed up and asked where they could help. Walter Harper had spent 15 years planting seeds in people as carefully as he planted them in the soil. Now they were beginning to grow. The hearing took place inside the Floyd County Community Center, a red brick building that had hosted everything from church fundraisers to high school graduations. By the time Evelyn and Cole arrived, nearly every seat was occupied. Farmers sat beside retirees, veterans beside teachers, church volunteers stood along the back wall. People who rarely agreed on anything had gathered for the same reason. The room grew quieter when Victor Langley entered. He wore a tailored navy suit and carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to winning. Several attorneys followed him inside. For years, that confidence had been enough. Today felt different. Richard Boone was the first witness. The room listened carefully as he described years of acquisition practices inside Langley Development. He explained how vulnerable property owners had been pressured into unfavorable sales. He described information withheld during negotiations and tactics designed to wear people down until resistance became impossible. No dramatic accusations were necessary. Facts carried their own weight. Victor's attorneys challenged every statement. Richard answered anyway. The fear that had nearly silenced him weeks earlier no longer controlled him. Then others began speaking. An elderly couple described losing family property after trusting one of Victor's representatives. A retired school principal recounted meetings where promises changed once paperwork was signed. Another witness produced correspondence that contradicted statements Victor's company had made publicly. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Piece by piece, the image Victor had carefully built over decades began to crack. Then something unexpected happened. The discussion stopped being about Victor. It became about Walter. One by one, people stood. Harold Fardson spoke first. His voice carried the roughness of age and old grief. After him came Martha Green, then others. A veteran, a mechanic, a nurse, a farmer. None of them spoke about business plans or economic projections. They spoke about a man who had shown up when nobody else did. A man who helped without asking for recognition. A man who believed communities survived because people chose to care about one another. Some stories were small: a ride to a medical appointment, a repaired porch step, A bag of groceries left anonymously during a difficult winter. Others carried deeper wounds. A veteran pulled back from isolation. A grieving spouse reminded that life still held purpose. The room listened. Even people who supported development listened, because everyone understood they were hearing something rare. Evidence of a life well lived. Evelyn never spoke. She simply sat with her hands folded in her lap, listening to stories she already knew and stories she was hearing for the first time. Tears gathered in her eyes more than once. She never wiped them away. By the end of the hearing, the atmosphere had shifted completely. The county board recessed for deliberation. When they returned, the decision surprised nobody. Blue Hollow Community Garden would remain protected under a permanent community preservation agreement. Additional support would be provided through county and private partnerships. Future development proposals for the property would be prohibited. The room erupted into applause, not because someone had won, because something worth protecting had survived. Outside the building, reporters surrounded Victor Langley before he reached his vehicle. Questions came quickly. Questions about Richard Boone's testimony. Questions about old property transactions. Questions about records already being requested by state investigators. For the first time, Victor appeared uncertain. Within days, additional complaints surfaced. Former employees began speaking to investigators. Several agencies opened inquiries into past dealings connected to Langley Development. Victor lost control of the resort project. Then he lost several board positions. Then major investors began distancing themselves. The legal process would take time. Public trust disappeared much faster. The following Sunday evening, Cole sat alone on the porch of his farm. The wooden box rested beside him. A thunderstorm had passed earlier, leaving the fields damp and shining beneath the fading light. Crickets sang from the fence line. Fireflies drifted through the tall grass near the barn. Lucky lay stretched across the porch boards, no longer small enough to fit comfortably inside Evelyn's old blue blanket. The puppy had grown. So had something else. Cole opened Walter's letter. This time he kept reading. The words were simple. That sounded exactly like Walter. No grand speeches, no attempts at wisdom, just honesty. The final section stopped him. Son, if you're reading this, then I've already gone home. I know something about you that you've never understood. You've spent years trying to repay a debt that doesn't exist. The men you lost would not want your punishment. They would want your life. Don't spend the years you've been given paying a bill to the dead. Spend them honoring the gift they left behind. Live well. Help people when you can. Let yourself belong somewhere. The tears came quietly. Cole did not fight them. For years he had carried the belief that survival required an explanation, that somehow he needed to earn what had been left to him. Walter understood the truth before he did. Life wasn't something owed. Life was something given. The summer arrived fully a few weeks later. Tomato plants climbed their supports. The orchard trees carried growing fruit. Children visited the garden with parents and grandparents. Volunteers laughed beneath shade tents while sorting vegetables for local food programs. The place felt alive again. On a warm Saturday morning, Evelyn sat on the wooden bench Walter had built years earlier. A paperback novel rested in her lap. Reading occupied only part of her attention. The rest remained fixed on the garden around her. Lucky raced through the grass, chasing absolutely nothing. His oversized paws still got him into trouble. Some things never changed. Near the edge of the property, Cole repaired a section of fencing damaged during the tornado. The work moved steadily beneath his hands. Not perfectly. His injured wrist still limited what he could do. That no longer seemed as important. The sound of laughter drifted across the garden. Someone called his name. Another volunteer waved from the greenhouse. Cole looked up. For a moment he simply stood there, listening. The wind moved softly through the trees. Voices carried across the property. Life continued. And for the first time since leaving the Navy, Cole Bennett no longer felt like the last man left behind. He had found his way home. The part of this story that stayed with me wasn't the hearing, the storm, or even the victory in the end. It was the letter. A piece of paper sat inside a wooden box for years, carrying words that Cole wasn't ready to hear. I think a lot of us have something similar in our lives. Maybe not a letter, but a memory, a conversation, or a kindness we never fully accepted. Sometimes we become so focused on what we lost that we stop noticing what remains. What I appreciate about Walter is that he never tried to fix people. He simply stayed present. He remembered names, showed up when it mattered, and left behind a trail of small acts that continued helping others long after he was gone. To me, that's one of the quiet ways grace often appears. Not through dramatic moments, but through ordinary people who choose to care. If this story reminded you of someone you've never forgotten, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. Feel free to share a memory, a prayer, or a lesson they left behind. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, kindness, and human connection, please consider liking the video and subscribing. This story is fictional, but the need to forgive ourselves and the comfort of being remembered are experiences many of us know by heart. Some gifts arrive when they're given. Others arrive years later when we're finally ready to receive them.